Shana Tova. I was one question away from winning $99,000. Actually, one letter. I was, this summer, on a nationally televised game show called the 1% Club. I did not win, as many of you have reminded me. So I figured I should at least get a sermon out of it. So tonight on Kol Nidre, I want to share with you what I learned from my game show experience, and in particular, what it means to take risks, and perhaps how we can think about what it might mean to be part of the 1%. So for the two of you who have not already watched the show, this is not Survivor where you have to scheme and outplay and outlast everyone and eat bugs. This is not Jeopardy where you have to know music or sports or art or history. The questions mostly rely on logic and common sense, like, here are some numbers, what is the next one in the sequence? What word is hidden in this picture? If you follow these instructions, what will you end up with? Before the show, the producers test out these questions on a whole bunch of people and categorize them based on how many people got right. So the 90% questions are the ones answered correctly by about 90% of the American public. Then how many can 80% answer, 70, and so on, down to 5% and 1%. So some of the questions have answers that are obvious. Some easy to work out with paper and pencil, and some are tough because you have 30 seconds to do them in your head, and some are tricky no matter what. Each episode starts with 100 contestants. And there is a 90% question, and then they ask an 80% question, and each time they ask a question, if you get it wrong, you are eliminated. And so they work their way down, fewer and fewer contestants, until you get to the 5% question. And you do get a chance, you can take a pass on one question, and for each contestant that is eliminated, they add $1,000 to the prize pot. Meanwhile, the host, Joel McHale, engages in clever banter with the participants, and in the end, they get down to just a handful of contestants, usually less than 5, sometimes just 1 or 2. Those contestants have a choice. They can take home a share of $10,000, or they can go for a chance to win up to $100,000. So you may ask, how did I get involved in these shenanigans? Well, my kids said it's kind of a random side quest, but kind of on brand. As it turns out, I did not apply to be on the show. The producers actually reached out to me. Someone must have put my name in the sorting hat. At first, I thought it was a scam. And I wondered, did I really want to put myself out there? In the end, I decided to go for it because for years, people have been telling me, you should go on a game show. Now, by the way, there is an elaborate process to get on the show. I know some people who applied and did not get picked. So you do practice questions, but there are also interviews and screen tests. They could fill the show with really smart people who would make for very boring TV. Their only sponsors would be No-Dose and maybe Tylenol. So I started out as one of the 100. I answered 13 questions correctly. I used my pass on the one about what bartender would make what drink, and I got to banter with Joel McHale. I ended up beating out a psychic, a mascot, and 96 other worthy people to be one of only 2 contestants who made it into the final round. And now I had a choice to make. Would I take the $5,000 or risk it all for the chance at up to $99,000? I went for it. So the last question was a very long sentence, and you had to figure out which 3 letters did not appear in the sentence and make a word. Now, 30 seconds when you are sounding a tekiah gedolah is a very long time. When you're on national TV trying to count 3 dozen letters, a little bit shorter. I was mostly there. I got the F, I got the O. I thought the last letter was a G, but it turned out it was an X. And why, yes, Steve, what do you know? The answer was fox. So there's a story of a king, and God offers him a choice of money or wisdom. He's a good and noble king, so of course he asks for the wisdom. His wish is granted, and as God's magic takes effect, the wisdom flows through him. And he says, I should have taken the money. So I did come away with a fair amount of wisdom. I learned 5 things that I want to share with you, and as is often the case in my sermons, the last is the most important. The first thing that I think we can learn is that small things do matter. You might think that it is pretty rare that one letter makes a difference of $99,000, but in fact, very often it does. In software, the Mariner 1 spacecraft, which cost $18 million, and this is back in 1962 when that was real money, blew up because there was one hyphen missing in the code. And there were like 4 lines of code in this whole thing that made it go. In American law, in 2017, a group of dairy delivery drivers sued for $1 million in overtime because of a missing comma in their contract. Packing for shipment or distribution is not the same thing as packing for shipment, comma, or distribution. It's also true in Judaism. We believe that every letter in the Torah matters, and there are 304,805 of them. A single one being wrong invalidates the whole thing. Because in fact, so often, just one letter in the Torah is the hook upon which a whole law, a whole story hangs. One letter in the Torah is the difference between whether a divorce is valid or not, whether locusts are kosher, they are, or how tefillin are made. The second lesson I learned is how connected we all are, and that you are never really out of sight. So I walked into this TV studio not expecting to know anyone. After all, if you choose 100 people, Jewish, non-Jewish, across every walk of life, from across the Southeast, what is the chance that I would know even one of them? What's the over-under? Always take the over. 2 people came up to me. Oh, Rabbi, I know you. She was a member of the Orthodox community in Dunwoody. Someone else was a friend of a congress. Oh, I was at a shiva you ran last week. Afterwards, people I had not connected with in years reached out to tell me that they had seen the show, and the answer was fox. I learned a third lesson when the show aired. I learned something about human nature and how it is that we respond to other people's successes and failures and how we feel about ourselves. So there were really 2 different categories of responses that I got from people. So when the show was on, a lot of people across Atlanta, across the country, were watching and yelling and cheering, wondering how much longer I could keep going, kind of like people do when they're watching my sermons online. And like people watched me for 42 minutes to an hour with commercials, I'm just saying. Afterwards, plenty of people said, you know, Rabbi, tough luck, you were great, we're so proud of you. To you I say, thank you. And then there were the folks who wanted to make sure that they knew, wanted to make sure that I knew, that they knew the right answer. You know, I got that one right away. It was so obvious. So it turns out that there is actually 1% of our synagogue whose last name is Fox, or who has lived on Fox Grape Lane. So you've earned the right. There was one congregant, however, not named Fox, who had his young, adorable granddaughter come up to me in the office. Rabbi, she said, my grandpa told me that I should teach you a word, fox. And I said, that's so sweet. A 3-letter word that starts with F. I'm going to teach you a 4-letter word that also starts with F. And you can teach it to your grandpa. True story. In general, not everyone is going to be happy with your success or support you in your failure. And so to those folks I say, I am sure you would have won. I am happy to recommend you to the producers for the next season, as long as you promise to donate a share of your winnings to Kol Nidre 5787. I learned something important about taking chances in life. A lot of people questioned whether I should go for the grand prize. Did I make the right choice? Was it a smart move? My friend Jay Kamen sent me a whole bunch of suggested sermons written by ChatGPT focusing on that very question of my regret. I actually have no regrets. It was actually, for me, a question of odds. I had practiced before the show, I had watched previous seasons, and I figured out that on average, I had about a 50% chance of making it to the final round. And then once I was there, 40 to 50% of getting the final question, that 1% question right. Betting $5,000 for a 50% chance of at least 49 seemed like a bet that was worth taking. Sometimes in life you have to try, you have to take a chance, even though you might come up short. We Jews know a little something about gambling. We know a little bit about taking chances. There are actually 3 Jewish holidays of gambling. On Hanukkah, dreidel is like Jewish roulette. On Purim, Haman cast lots to determine the date of our people's potential destruction. But the most important gambling day is actually Yom Kippur. But Brotherhood, wait and hear me out before you schedule poker for later tonight. On Yom Kippur Day, in the Beit Mikdash, in the temple, the high priest would bring forth 2 goats. One was to be offered as a sacrifice upon the altar, and one was to be sent off to Azazel to carry the sins of our people into the wilderness. Lots were cast as to which would be which. There are several technical explanations as to why lots were used, rather than just saying, okay, you go there and you go there. But I think it's meant to be a reminder of the randomness of life. And the truth is, each of us every day is constantly taking risks. Because, by the way, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, himself was taking a big chance. When he went into the Holy of Holies, there was a rope tied around his leg in case he was not successful, and they had to drag out what was left of him. Quite often, during the period of the Second Temple, that rope had to be used. In everything we do in life, yes, there must be planning, there must be effort, but there is also an element of chance. Life is inherently unpredictable. Everything is a gamble, not just when you play the odds in the stock market or your weekly poker or mahjong game. You take a risk every time you get in your car. When you choose a life partner, you're taking a risk. Who are they going to be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now? If you try to have children, you have no idea if it's going to happen. You have no idea who they're going to grow up to be. Are you going to stay in your current job? Do you jump to a new opportunity? Do you go out on your own? The most important realization I came to did not come right away, but has settled in with the passing months. And I'd like to suggest that even though I lost, and most people listening, I think, did not even play, we are all actually members of a 1% club of one kind or another. Tonight, we have been blessed with luck and good fortune beyond our ability to comprehend. We actually all breathe very rarefied air, even if it is not air-conditioned at the moment. We just don't always realize it. So, for example, you might be a member of the financial 1% club. 15 years ago, the Occupy Wall Street movement created the idea that society is divided between the 1% of the haves and the 99% of the have-nots, in a very derogatory sense. So it was, for them, it was not about being in the 1% club, it was about clubbing the 1%. Couple that with the fact that people think it's crass to talk about money. People would rather talk about their hemorrhoids than share their last pay stub with you. And so people in general, no one is going to say they are a 1%er. They might say, you know what, I am upper middle class. So economists, statisticians have tried to specify what does it actually take to be a member of the 1% in the United States. And there are a lot of different ways to compute that, based on assets, based on income. Is it you as an individual? Is it your household? So based on annual income, the number seems to be somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. $500,000 and $1 million. So that's like winning a whole season of the 1% Club. Or one season of Survivor, I suppose. But the exact number depends what data you use and depends where you live. Being a 1%er doesn't get you very far in Manhattan. But it costs less to be rich in Alabama. Then again, you have to live in Alabama. So I'm not singling anyone out, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I suspect that there is more than 1% of our population, of our B'nai Torah community, that doesn't have to go on TV to see what a check for $100,000 looks like. And by the way, a lot more of us are 1% adjacent. Because by the way, to be in the top 5% in America, to make it to the final round, you have to be making about $250,000 a year. And that's not too far off the average in a lot of the neighborhoods where we live. On the other hand, there are plenty of people in this room to whom that does not apply. Something like a third of our congregants, maybe a little less, are in a situation where they cannot afford to pay full dues. Now, by the way, our policy is that it's confidential. I never know. That's one of the reasons why we ask for money on Kol Nidre, so that we don't have to ask people for money if they don't have it. But look, by the way, also know that here in Sandy Springs, there are plenty of kids who would go hungry on weekends if it wasn't for our backpack buddies. And so the people who give to Kol Nidre tonight will help make sure that no one is left behind. But by the way, even if you are living comfortably, but not living large, even if at this moment you are struggling, and I hope things get better this year, you might still be a 1%er. On TV, I bet $5,000 on the outcome of 30 seconds of my life. In most of Asia, that is a year's salary. And by the way, to be a 1%er compared to the world, you are getting by on less than $60,000 a year. So by that measure, I suspect that more of us in the room than not are members of the 1% Club worldwide. There are a lot of definitions of what it means to be rich. On Rosh Hashanah, I mentioned the sage Ben Zoma, who says, in Pirkei Avot, he says, who is wise? The one who learns from everyone. Who is strong? Who has gvura? The one who can restrain himself. Who is rich? The one who is happy with his lot. So it's not whether you have a lot, it is whether you are happy with the lot you have. And by the way, there is another important way that almost all of us here are part of a club that is even more exclusive than the 1% Club, the Jewish people. And if you are not, come see me after class. I'm happy to fix things. I saw a study where they asked people around the world, how many Jews do you think there are in the world? The most popular answer was, unfortunately, too many. But people came back with answers like 100 million, 500 million. There must be 1 billion Jews in the world, people said. Well, if you go to Costco on a Sunday, you might think that's true. But in fact, there are about 16 million of us in the entire world. Maybe a little more depending on how you count. Given that there are 8 billion people in the world, we make up 0.2%. That is such a sliver of the pie. Now, there are some outliers, so it's not a shock. In Israel, we make up 77% of the population. But after that, it drops off real fast. second highest population, America, we are about 2.5% of the population. And we're about 1% of Canadians, but you have to discount that to like 7.7% because, you know. Everywhere else, we are a fraction of a percent. We are a rounding error. By the way, there are only 6 countries in the entire world that have more Jews than Metro Atlanta. And yet, we Jews punch above our weight. We have done more than our share. We have brought the world the Bible. We have brought the world wisdom and ethics. We have won more than 22% of all the Nobel Prizes that have ever been given. That's like 100 times our share. So if your kid doesn't get one, you scold them and tell them to study harder. Jews are some of the most important philanthropists and artists in the world. We succeed because we have a strong ethical tradition. We succeed because we value education. We succeed because we look after each other. We succeed because we look to God. So, by the way, I want to point out that in general, racism is about saying that the other guy over there is inferior to you, right? They are a lower class. Somehow, when people hate Jews, anti-Semitism is a different thing. If I can quote Steve, you've reversed the polarity. When people hate us, starting with Pharaoh in Egypt, they come against us with the claim that we are too smart, that we are too powerful. It's an unfair advantage that you have. If those folks stop spending all their energy trying to drag us down, maybe they would accomplish something for themselves. There is no doubt that there are ways that it is tough to be Jewish right now. With all of the negativity and hate out there, is this a club that I actually want to be part of? I think it is fair to say that hate against us is worse than it has been in 2 generations, but look at the average. Over the last 2 millennia, there have been very few times that Jews have been as lucky as we are right now. So you know what? We spend something like $200,000 a year on Sandy Springs Police to protect you and me when we come to pray. Call Nidre helps with that too. But by the way, for most of the last 2,000 years, the Jewish strategy was to hide in the attic, hide in the basement, and hope that the police did not come. This coming week, we are going to, in various ways at various times, commemorate the losses of October 7th and the war that followed, and beyond the loss of life on that day, the terrible affliction of our hostages, the trauma that it will take a generation to undo, the damage to Israel's standing in the world has been catastrophic. Tomorrow, I will speak about the possibility, the hope that peace may yet break out. Someone will have to tell me whether it happened because I'm not on my phone. But the truth is, I think we don't realize how lucky we were that day. When Hamas attacked, they assumed that Hezbollah and Iran would follow suit. And if they had, I don't think that Israel would still be with us. The fact that Israel was able to get back on its feet and wipe out most of Hezbollah's leadership was remarkable, which gives me an idea for the next person whose phone goes off in synagogue. Silence your cell phone before your cell phone silences you. One year ago tonight, nobody remembers this. 1 year ago tonight, Iran launched hundreds of missiles at Israel and caused 2 casualties. It's like the reverse 99% club. It's like getting out on the 90% question. In the 12-day war, we fared worse. There were tens. But by the way, Israeli strategists, as they were preparing for the day when that would come, assumed that the losses would be in the thousands. My friend, my colleague, Rabbi David Wolpe, has a shtick. which I will copy loosely. He imagines having a conversation with his great-great-great-grandfather in the shtetl in Europe. And he says to great-great-great-grandpa, you know, things aren't so good for Jews at Harvard. Anderson Cooper said so. His ancestor, great-great-great Zadie, responds, there are Jews at Harvard? Wolpe says, Zadie, there's so much anti-Israel sentiment there. Wait, there's an Israel? You know, there are questions about how much the U.S. government will help. Wait, the government is helping Israel? But, and this is most important, there has never been a time when Jews have been freer to thrive as Jews. There is so little holding us back from achieving our potential spiritually, educationally. For centuries, Jewish learning was in the hands of a precious few. There were Yemenite Jews who had to learn to read upside down because when it was your turn to read, you were on the other side of the book. Now, every traditional text you could ever want is available on your computer, on your phone. You can sign up any hour of the day or night, classes on any topic, any perspective, online, in person. There are, by the way, hundreds of Jewish organizations in Atlanta. Every person here probably owns 3 Jewish organizations. You can pick from 40 different synagogues in Atlanta. I mean, at this point tonight, you're probably committed. But if you're looking to do sports Jewish, to do music Jewish, to do knitting Jewish, Jewish movies, there is somebody out there who is doing it. Our ancestors only dreamed of the possibility of visiting Israel. The fact that you can get on a plane and touch down and be in Jerusalem within 24 hours and your luggage within another 48 is a miracle that our ancestors would have given anything for. They prayed for that every day, 3 times a day, and now it's just a little expensive. I am hoping, by the way, that this summer I get to take a group there to feel the joy of what it means to walk the ground of our Holy Land. In the meanwhile, please keep asking Delta to bring back the direct flight. Another way that we are lucky, our synagogue, our congregation is actually in its own 1% club as far as congregations go. So many synagogues, especially conservative synagogues, are treading water, they're struggling, they're aging, retrenching, merging. We're thriving. For each of the last 20 years, we have grown our membership by at least 1%, and usually a couple points more than that. And unless I annoy a lot of you tomorrow, we are not going to break our streak. We have new members joining us in every decade of life, from 20s to 80s. They're bringing great skills, they're bringing talents, they're bringing energy. And if you look at what we offer, if you look at services and classes, activities, all the ways that we help you be a lever to make a difference in the world, it's overwhelming. And we are on call for, if you will, that 1% of days in your life when you really need us. The days of your greatest successes and delights, the days that are the toughest. As a rabbi, when I talk to my colleagues, I feel so lucky to be a part of this community. Our congregation is able to keep its doors open because people at every percentile kick in. There are 33 families at B'nai Torah who are members of our Yad and Sefer Torah societies. They give generously. They give $10,000 or more to help keep us going. And by the way, about 20% of what it takes to run from our synagogue, well, actually running from the synagogue is free, but run our synagogue comes from those families. So if you are an actual 1%er and you've been sitting on the sidelines, this is your big chance. If I had won the $99,000, And Wendy knows this, we would have joined that club. On the other hand, I also promised Wendy that she would be sporting a really nice designer purse if I won the $99,000, so there you go. Times are tough in the Heller family. 2 kids at college, it's crazy. Thank God. But I will still make my Kol Nidre pledge this year because, like that guy from the Hair Club for Men, I'm not just the B'nai Torah rabbi, I am also a client. So you might not be a 1%er according to the economists. What do economists know anyway? You might not be in the top 1%. But what if you committed to do the minimum? What if you committed to do 1%? What would it mean to you to say, I'm giving 1% of myself to being Jewish? What if you gave 1% of your time? There are 365 days a year. So let's say you're here tonight, you come at least 3 days a year. So that's 1/100th of the days. You're an attendance 1%er. What if you committed to come to Daily Minyan another 1% of the time, 3 more times a year? And by the way, Daily Minyan is a lot shorter. Daily Minyan is shorter than this sermon. What if you joined our Kesher committee to connect with people who are facing illness, or became an usher greeter to help people feel welcome when they come in the door and they don't know all 950 of our families yet? What if you decided to increase your Jewish knowledge by 1% and participate in regular study? Learn Hebrew. Jewish tradition says that you should give 10% of your income to charity. What if 1% of that went to your synagogue? So yes, I missed out on $99,000. And yes, the answer was Fox. But I gained some wisdom. I gained some wisdom about why details about why even a single letter matters, about human nature, about how we support each other and are jealous of each other. I learned that we are all more connected than you could imagine. I learned how important it is to take chances in life because otherwise you never win. And most of all, I realized how fortunate we are to be in this room tonight. Whether or not you are a 1%er according to the economists, you can be in the top 1% of appreciating and using well what you have. You can appreciate what a tremendous gift it is, how unlikely it is that you were born Jewish. And how unlikely is it that for you to be born at this moment in Jewish history where despite everything we are facing, we have so much opportunity. I missed out on $99,000, but tonight I am pledging 1% of that. Actually, I'll round up. I wonder if there are 99 other people here tonight who would make that a club, who will match the money that I am not giving because I didn't win it. Let me leave you with this 1% question. Now, it's taken me like 30 minutes to get here, so I'll give you longer than 30 seconds. You actually have the whole year. My question is, will you be part of the 1% at B'nai Torah? Shana Tova, a good year.